Welcome to the Journal of Biophilic Design podcast. Well, many thanks for joining us. We're really thrilled to be joined by Kenneth Freeman, who's Biophilic Design and horticultural consultant. I'm going to leave Kenneth to talk about what he actually does, but he has just helped me on my plants just now. So he's just done a bit of a consultant on my rubber plant. So thanks for that, Kenneth. Thanks so much for joining us today.
My pleasure, absolutely.
Obviously, for our listeners, I would encourage you to go to the journalbiophilic.design.com and look at a podcast that we did before on rehumanizing the workplace. It's called The New Workplace, How to Use Biophilic Design. And obviously you can search for that in your RSS feeds if you're on Spotify or on Amazon or iTunes. And also on YouTube, by the way, we're on there now, so do go on there too. Anyway, Kenneth, that's the plug out of the way. Kenneth, obviously you've see it's all been through lockdown and stuff, and I know you're involved in lots of great projects. Can you tell us a bit about what you do and what you're up to right now, please?
I'm up to quite a lot of different things
since
becoming a self-employed freelance consultant. I suppose 10 months ago, I've been trying a number of different things. I've been working with designers to help with the specification of plants to go into buildings. I've been doing some work with a couple of technology companies looking at products that can be used with interior planting and air quality. And I've also been doing some work with a fairly large interior landscaper on their new sort of home delivery service for interior plants. You know, the idea of putting plants into people's houses. Everybody likes house plants, but they're actually seeing house plants being used in home working situations is proving quite interesting. And I've also been working with Fusion Spaces to develop our work-free assessment method. And this is a way that people can, or organizations really, can help their home-based staff to assess their home workplace to make sure that it is not only sort of compliant with sort of best practices, but also nurtures the right sort of well-being, and tries to make the home working environment as happy, healthy, productive, engaging as possible, especially when you might not have seen a colleague in the flesh for several months.
And going on from that about the workplace and obviously people working from home, obviously during lockdown, people, have been obviously working from home. I mean, how have you seen sort of, the lockdown environments having an impact on people generally?
It varies considerably. I think when you read reports and speak to colleagues, some people have been able to manage extremely well. The nature of their work has been such that working from home has actually been, a very good way. They're free from the distractions of the office. They're free from, that sometimes toxic management culture that you get in some workplaces where people really have no other job but to make people's lives awkward. And people who are in sort of, medium or senior positions, or older people in the workplace, are probably finding the adaptation to home working easier than a lot of others. They might be living in decent sized houses. They probably have space where they can set up a home working environment quite successfully. But if you're younger, if you're in a more junior situation, if you're sharing a house with other people that are also working from home, if you're perching on the end of your bed or trying to set up in, on a kitchen worktop, or I've even seen, people talk about using their ironing boards almost as an adjustable desk, because you can raise the height. But that's not an ideal working environment. And if you're used to, interacting with people a lot more, then I think it's been a real struggle. I think people adapted extremely well right at the beginning, because it was almost a needs must. We have to find a way of doing it. Everybody was in it together. There was that sense of a sort of almost a communal spirit of doing it, and people learning how to work from home. I think if you're not used to it, if you don't like it, there are some significant mental health benefits. And when you try to juggle, homeschooling and childcare or other caring responsibilities, it must have been a nightmare. I found it easy because I've worked from home for an awfully long time, and I have to sometimes give myself a reality check that just because I found it very straightforward and I had the facilities because I've always done it, that's not the same for everyone. And it, we need to be very aware of other people's circumstances, and they're not going to be the same as your own. And that's where I think trying to work out how to manage a home workspace becomes very important.
Yeah, I mean, how do you, I mean, obviously with biophilic design hats on, I mean, how do you see plants and sort of biophilic design really making spaces better for people when they're working from home?
It's all about personalisation of space, but also about comfort. But I think biophilic design, and we sort of touched on this last time we spoke, it's about the 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 whole person, the whole sensory environment, but and also about sort of the sort of the mental workspace you're in as well as the physical workspace. So I think a biophilic environment in a home workplace is an environment that makes you feel comfortable and makes you feel happy. So for me, that does involve lots of plants, but it does also involve, I always have to be able to look through a window. That for me is very important. Might not be for other people, might not be possible for other people, but for me, I like to be able to look out either over onto a garden or from where I am at the moment. There's fields directly opposite, and it's lovely. But there are other things as well. Lighting is important. The acoustic environment is important, and then you start needing to think about the ergonomics as well. Can you make the necessary adjustments? Do you have a comfortable chair to work on? Those, a lot of people sort of separate those elements of the workplace from sort of biophilic, but I think biophilic design is very holistic, and it really is just about comfort. But in terms of planting, for me, it's a focus for attention. It's something you can care for. It's something that you can't concentrate on work non-stop. You have to be able to. Your brain needs distracting. Even when you're working at full pelt, most of your brain isn't engaged in that work. It needs to be distracted by something, and even if you're not consciously aware of it, if you're in a nice environment, then that's a really good way of doing it. And plants, they're natural. They bring a sense of nature indoors, but they're also extremely good value for money as well. I mean, you can buy a decent house plant for the cost of a bottle of wine, and it'll last an awful lot longer, and it's going to be there, and it's going to be something that will grow and change, and you can adjust your surroundings so easily just by repositioning a few plants, even if you don't do anything else with your decor. You can create a new environment that way, and that I think is quite important.
No, it's absolutely right. And also, as you said, it's that sort of what Dr. Sally Augustine talks about is that, that sort of cognitive refreshment, is that just looking up. I mean, I've got a plant. I did an interview with Sue Thomas, actually. She does sort of about technobiophilia. And she said about having a little plant, having a garden behind your computer screen. So while it's nice to have it all behind you to go, oh, look what me, I've got a lovely environment, actually for your own cognitive refreshment actually is to have a plant behind your screen, sort of so that you've got something to rest your eyes on. There's that biophilic element, there's that natural element that you get, yourself you get, obviously we're everybody's talking about the future workplace and sort of the future spaces and how we're going to work. Are we going to be working from home most of the time? Are we going to be working in the office? I think it's coming down to a hybrid situation generally. People are now used to, I work from home, this is really good. I can walk my dog if I want to. I can, I've got a bit more freedom. There's the kind of, that's really good for us. I mean, how can employers also create using biophilic design? How can they create spaces in for this in the new workplace, in the new place that they're going to go to entice them back, or to make them feel comfortable? You know, how can they shape a space using plants or biophilic design?
Uh,
Yeah.
yeah, I mean that's a really good question. Obviously, a lot of office space is going to be trimmed back. There isn't going to be the capacity to have you know, an awful lot of people working in one go. I think people want to feel safe in the office, and
Yeah.
you know, it's not just about sort of the risk of infection, although that is hugely important. I think they want that sort of sense of psychological safety as well. People are now used to working in an environment that they can control.
Yeah.
Although we've seen some fairly pervasive things going on where some companies are putting in monitoring and tracking software on people's computers, and I think that is an appalling thing to do. I mean, that's just going to ruin everything. But going back to sort of the idea of the workplace, I think workplaces are, you know, the idea of hybrid working is here to stay. You're seeing lots of companies going to you know, one, two, maybe 3 days in the office occasionally, and the rest of the time working from home or in other remote locations. And I think that's quite an interesting idea as well. But in those offices, I think the purpose of offices is going to change. Obviously, some people will have to work in an office because of the nature of their work, but for other people, I think offices are going to be meeting places, they're going to be collaboration spaces. So biophilic design in those places are going to have to enable people to find somewhere that works for them. So I suspect there'll be a use for biophilic design to break up the big expanses. You're going to need quiet areas. You're going to have to try and do something about the acoustics in, you know, in those spaces if you're going to use them for collaboration and meeting rooms. I think there's going to be need to create, you know, physical separation between people. Don't like the term social distancing. My friend Craig Knight says that's the last thing you need. What you need is physical distancing. Social distancing is absolutely wrong. You need social closeness, and he's spot on about that. But in a building, you're going to need some sort of physical separation. People are going to want to be able to be separated from other people, and plants and other biophilic elements are a really good way of doing that and creating a sense of calm, creating a sense of creativity as well. I mean, some research has shown how biophilic design can increase creativity and situational intelligence, and that's what you need in a lot in workplaces.
Yeah, exactly. I'd be quite interested, and I don't know if anybody's actually done any studies on this, but if you know, that you said talk about safety, or to feel safe, not safe, but to feel safe in an environment when you're going back. I wonder if anybody's done any studies like planting, like, or positioning a large tree or a large, you know, thing with a large kind of bark, you know, sort of, what do you call it, stem. There's got a technical term. Of a tree, sort of in a foyer or in an environment where they are, so they feel grounded and they feel nurtured, and it's stable and it's solid. And I wonder if there's something, I mean, I don't know how you would even begin to create a study on this, but I'd be interested to see the research that does that create an environment that people go, oh, you know, it's a trusted place, it's a big tree, it's been there for ages. And then you have, like you said, all the little smaller plants that you can move them around, and you know, you can create more of a fluid environment. You can, and also about the acoustics as well, you can create, like, barriers and things. But I'm just interested in the psychology of the plants, even, you know.
I'm not aware of anything, but I mean, there have been studies looking at how people use a space when they're planted, whether, you know, people tend to sit amongst foliage.
Yeah.
You know, they like to be sort of almost sort of cocooned by it. But that's an interesting idea about that sort of permanence and anchor point, with some big specimen plants, where that is where people would feel, you know, more comfortable. I don't know. That would be a fascinating experiment to do. I don't know who could do it.
No, exactly. How you would, you know, before and after, I suppose you'd have to do, or something. I don't know, but Yeah, or maybe how you feel, maybe you could do that, you know, the emotive side of things, you could measure that, probably the emotions, you know, maybe.
I know there was a study carried out at Heathrow with at one of the departure gates, with a green wall. A company called Biotecture, run by a gentleman called Richard Sabin, worked with Heathrow at one of their departure gates, and they measured things like people's sense of satisfaction and comfort and anxiety before and after a green wall was installed in a particular area, and noticed some very significant changes, very significant improvements in sort of senses of well-being. It might be worth having a chat with him about that. But that sort of does lend some credence to the idea that there is that sense of safety, I suppose.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So anyway, there's one for the back pocket.
Yeah.
You're working as well with this with this other company, and you mentioned before about this work-free system. What is that?
We started looking at this last summer. We were concerned that the people I work with, the organisation called Fusion Spaces, they're very much into creating well-being led environments, working environments, and also in the healthcare sector that encourage well-being and encourage that sense of psychological safety. And we were thinking that an awful lot of work has been done on assessing workplaces. There's things like the Well Buildings certification, Fitwell, and that sort of thing. And we thought there really needs to be a way of translating some of those ideas to the home workplace, but concentrating much more on your sense of safety and well-being at work rather than the purely physical elements. When you look at some of the other certification systems, their well-being is often centered on things like the physical environment to make sure that you're healthy. So it will look at air quality, it will look at acoustics, it will look at pollution and materials. And there are, of course, the sort of the cultural things as well that the organizational culture that makes you feel better as well. But when you're in a home working environment, obviously your employer has far less control over ensuring that you have a happy, healthy, safe, engaging workplace. That's sort of been dropped on you. But we felt that both employers and their employees would benefit from a way of assessing the home working environment that ensured that the employers were carrying out the right sort of duty of care, were developing appropriate policies, for example, on how do you ensure health and safety work, because you're still at work. It's just not on your premises, but you, as an employer, you have a duty of care. And then also looking at the physical attributes of that home working place. Have you been, are you able to set up your home working environment in a way that's good, ergonomically sound? Do you have good lighting? Do you have reasonable ventilation? Are you being exposed to nasty pollutants? But are you doing your back some damage because you don't have a decent chair or you can't adjust your screen? So that would sort of help isolate the physical working environment, and that also includes a lot to do with biophilic design as well. If the lighting's good, ideally it would be, it might be a biodynamic light, or it would be a really high quality setup that you've got, and you have plants and you have access to nature. And then the third pillar relates to the sort of the psychological, the mental health side of things as well, and the organizational culture. So do you still have to work to rigid timings, or are you going to be given a bit more leeway in how, when you start and finish, just as long as you get work done? Is it going to be results based, or is it going to be time based? You know, are you able to, you know, some companies enforce dress codes, for example, when you're working at home. Well, I can understand that if you're on a Zoom meeting, but, you know, for the rest of the time, who knows? You know, some companies I've heard of, you know, insist that when you're working at home, you have your camera on all the time.
Oh,
You know,
no.
just to, you know, that sort of presenteeism, remote controlled presenteeism is an appalling idea. And there's also safeguarding that you have to take into account, because there are other people who are sharing your house and they might not want to be on camera, or it's inappropriate, or they are also working and maybe they're working for someone that you don't need to be able to see what they're doing.
Yeah.
So there are all of those things. So it's a way of assessing that sort of environment. And we thought that those three pillars, that sort of assurance, the physical workplace and the engagement side, they all had equal value. And the thing that's really quite interesting about it is it's not just an employer assessment. You know, you ask the employers how they feel that they're doing. Are they doing the things that they need to do? You also ask a parallel set of questions of the employees,
Yeah.
and you see how aligned they are. And if they're aligned, that's a good sign. Even if they're aligned fairly low down, at least you know what you've got to work for. But if you find that the employer is saying, we're really great up here, and the response from your employees is saying, actually, we've got a problem,
Yeah.
then that gives you the opportunity to come up with an action plan to try and you know, get things right. But that's quite a complicated, almost a consultancy type project that an employer would need to take on. They'd really need to be absolutely certain that that's what they had to do. And I think when we first came up with it, we were perhaps a little bit too early in the idea, because when we first came up with it, we spoke to a number of different organizations and said, would you like this? And they said, yep, it looks just like the sort of thing we need, but we don't know what the workplace is going to be like. You know, we started developing it last summer. We were ready to go with it in the early spring this year. And of course, people didn't know whether everybody would be back at work at any point, you know, or how things were going. You know, organizations were a bit unsure. So we're now sort of slightly refocusing it so that organizations now I think most companies or employers have a much better idea about what they're doing. There's going to be a lot more hybrid work, and we can refocus it in that direction.
Yeah.
So that was sort of the really big chunky idea, but we then came up with a sort of streamlined version of it, which we call Rapid, which is that opens the way to do a more complicated you know, consultancy type assessment, but this is much more of a way that employers can send out almost a survey to their staff, and you know, we can then highlight, you know, things that might need to be done, and in a way it almost generates a shopping list on the sort of things that can be developed, so an employer can go back and say, right, it does look as if we need to do something about chairs, for example, so maybe we can do that. You see some companies are even offering budgets to their home-based staff, saying, right, okay, we know you're going to be working at home for, you know, 2 or 3 days a week, or even permanently. You know, here's a few £100 or a few £1,000 for you to spend on what you need to set up your workplace. With work free and the Rapid part of it, we can say, right, we can help guide you. So we say, okay, your responses seem to indicate that there are issues with this and this. These are the sorts of things you should be looking to spend that budget on, to help you create a healthier working environment, and ideally a biophilic environment.
Yeah. Okay, that's really great. So you've obviously, it'd be great if there's a little button you can say, "Oh, more plants, please, boss."
Well, ideally, yes. I mean, that's always going to, for me, that would always be an important thing. And I you know, you're finding that employees are doing that.
Yeah.
Another company I'm doing some work with is doing sort of mail order houseplants, effectively, but a lot of their clients are corporate bodies who are buying plants on behalf of their staff, and they are buying hundreds of plants at a time and getting them sent out to their home-based staff. It's either as a gift or as an acknowledgement for the hard work they've been doing and continue to do working from home, or it could be part of the idea of creating an enriched working environment, and having plants there. I think that says an awful lot. You can imagine sort of the buzz you'd get as an employee when someone knocks on your door and presents you with a fantastic plant. You think, well, actually, my company does care for me, and that is going to have an impact on your sense of self-worth, and also your sense of pride of working for that particular company. You can think, well, actually, that's a really nice touch. And you know what? It's not a very expensive thing to do. As I say, you can buy a good houseplant for for a relatively small amount of money, but it's an important gesture, I think.
Yeah, it's a lovely thing. We think we all love getting a bunch of flowers, and I you know what I mean. It's sort of it's on that par, isn't it? When you think you've something that's going to be a permanent fixture as well, if it's got, especially if it's in a plant pot, and you can look at it, and then it's that connection with the employer as well, isn't it? Just thinking, oh, actually, that self value, the fact that the employer has valued you as well and cares for you because of all the the good things that come off a plant, the air quality and stuff as well. So
yeah.
I suppose really final question really, and kind of an update on the as you know, as the people listening, they know that I always ask this question, but if you could paint the world with a magic brush of biophilia, what would it look like for people working from home in particular, or for the world? What would it be for you?
It's got to be somewhere where it's comfortable for you, and I think that's I don't think there's a one size fits all for it. I think there's a one size fits one. Everybody's environment is unique, and particularly the home. You're no longer in a big office where every desk is exactly the same. Your environment is going to be incredibly personal to you. So biophilia for you might be very different from someone else, but there are those core elements. For me, those core elements are a view through a window, planting, really good light. I've been sent a desk light from a company called Waldman, and the difference it has made. I thought I had good light. I'd buy a window and I've got a reasonable lighting, but I got this one, and the difference it's made in terms of things like the quality of light around the workspace. That's good. That's a bit of a digression, but painting that picture, it's about being able to work comfortably the way that you want to work. It's not about having too much imposition from afar. If you're working from home and your employer is too intrusive, they're invading your space. They don't have rights over your space. They're intruding. They are they're effectively renting your home. So a home working environment needs to be where it's your space, and you set the rules and you set the standards, you design it the way you want it. And I think for me it does involve having greenery and views, and the ability to get up and go and have a potter in the garden for 10 minutes just to take a break. But as soon as an employer starts imposing policies that work policies are one thing, but policies that relate to your working environment, even though it's not their working environment to impose on, that's important. They shouldn't cross that line. I don't know whether that's biophilic or not, but I think that's to me that's very important. The idea that the sort of they have enough. Employees have enough of their time in your head. they don't need that so much time to sort of monitor your home working environment as well. Let people get on with their job. People who get on with their job know what they do. Most people want to do a good job. They want to do they're good at their jobs. They know what they're doing. They don't need the sort of toxic supervision that you get in a workplace. Yeah, so maybe biophilic design is the absence of HR managers.
Thank you for listening to the Journal of Biophilic Design podcast.